What's up guys, Phoenix here. This video is going to be another Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile video for the new August 29th, 2016 Forbidden and Limited list, and it's going to be on a deck that I personally hold really dear and really enjoy playing, despite how unhealthy it might actually end up being for the game, and that is the new Herald of Perfection deck, or if you want to call it Cyber Angel Herald, Herald Angels, Ritual Herald, like Herald Sanctuary. I've seen tons of different names popping up for this deck in the community on the internet, but it basically all amounts to the same generic thing. It is a Herald of Perfection deck utilizing the new Cyber Angel support as well as Ritual Sanctuary from Dragons of Legend 3. Those cards were imported to us from the OCG in that set, and they've added a huge boost to the Herald of Perfection deck in general based off, what you're allowed to play now, the different engines you can incorporate into the deck, how you can play the deck turn by turn, the amount of consistency you get boosted. All of these different factors just culminate into a basically new age Herald of Perfection deck, or as me and my friend Owsley like to call it, Rituals Ruin the Game Part 2, obviously with Necros being Part 1. This deck is incredibly consistent now with what it's capable of doing, and it's ultimately just usually puts up Herald of Perfection and tons of negations as well as protection for Herald off of other extenuating circumstances. Pretty much the only clear-cut out to Herald in most situations is a Kaiju, but even then in some situations that's not an out anymore because you can put up things like double Herald, which means you can't get double Kaiju'd, and then your only outs at that point become like Lava Golem and Raw Sphere mode. But regardless, this is a deck that I really enjoy playing, and me and Owsley have been working on this deck list for a little bit over a week at this point, just tweaking it down, actually putting some real work into it, and ultimately getting it into what we basically consider a standardized form at this point. It just seems really consistent. It's the deck list that's giving us the best results, all that sort of nonsense. Now, if you are a patron of my channel, then you've already seen me play this deck in the past through some duel videos. If you're new to the channel and you just stumbled upon this video, there are some links in the description that I'm going to put there to some gameplay videos of me playing this deck. If you're interested in how the deck, functions gameplay-wise, there will definitely be links there to the games that I've played with this deck. But if you've already seen this deck in action, you're basically just going to be using this video to get some deeper card explanation and choices. But before I start the deck profile, after I've been rambling for 2 minutes, I'm just going to say one more quick thing. I've got a bunch of these World Championship 2016 sleeves left over from Worlds when I went there a couple weeks back. And I'm going to be trying to sell a bunch of these in little packets of 15 to go on players' extra decks. So if you're interested in purchasing a packet of them, a little packet of 15 of them, then message me on my personal Facebook page. A link to them is in the description. A link to my Facebook page is in the description. And if you message me there, then we can talk about me shipping them out to you, getting payment, all that sort of nonsense, if you're interested. If not, then no harm, no foul. Let's just get into this deck list. But like I said, this is something that I consider, that me and Owsley both consider to be extremely just standardized. we just cut all the nonsense out and just went straight for the meat of what this deck was trying to do. And so basically that starts out with 3 Herald of Perfection and 3 Saphira, Queen of Dragons. These cards complement each other really well. Herald of Perfection gets fueled by Saphira. It also gets protected by inherently summoning Saphira, because that means you're going to be putting Hymn of Light in the graveyard, which also serves as an added protective layer for Herald as well as Saphira itself. Basically, the only real way to out-Herald in this deck is with a Kaiju, basically, like I've already addressed, because Saphira is going to immediately pay for itself when you summon it alongside Herald, because in the end phase is going to add you a fairy back, which is going to inherently give you another negation. And then every time you're negating cards on your opponent's turn with Herald, and they're not getting these off the board because you have so much protection, such a big protective layer for them, you're going to add cards back with Saphira to fuel you on your next turn in the form of Star Seraphs, stuff like that, or you're going to be drawing cards. There's just so many different play lines you can perform with Herald and Saphira on the board, and it just provides such a big net of what you're allowed to do. And then the last 3 ritual monsters in the deck is 3 copies of Cyber Angel Benton. Now, you don't actually ritual summon this. I don't play Machine Angel Ritual in this build. This card is literally only used for its best effect, which is when this card is tributed, you can add a light fairy type monster from your deck to your hand. That includes itself. So you can add Manju, you can add Star Seraphs, you can add itself, you can add Herald. The only card you cannot add in the deck is Saphira, because it's a light dragon, not a light fairy. But that's hardly ever relevant. But you can keep adding copies of Cyber Angel Benton. You can add copies of your other little level 4 guys like Star Seraphs and Manjus. And ultimately, it just adds a huge amount of consistency to the deck. It just happened to be the right level, being level 6. And that just makes it perfect for this deck, because it allows you to do a lot of basically free interactions where you tribute this off for Dawn of the Herald to summon Herald of Perfection, get a search, and then immediately add it back to your hand off of Dawn of the Herald's effect. So ultimately, you get all these really cool little interactions that ultimately yield you a lot of pluses and meld your hand into having anywhere between 3 to 5 fairies in your hand at the end of your turn, with just having Herald on the board, and that allows you to just have so many negations on your opponent's turn. But Carrying on, 3 copies of Star Seraph Scepter and 3 copies of Sovereignty. These cards are amazing because, one, they're searchable off of Benton. You can resolve like Stick Chair in hands where you opened neither of them, and that's insane because you can just use 2 Benton searches to get Stick Chair and then resolve Star Seraph Scepter and Sovereignty into just an immediate draw 3 cards play, and usually take a card out of your opponent's hand off of like Evil Swarm or Ouroboros, and just puts you really far ahead in the game. But these cards also just allow you to have, accessibility into cards that answer your opponent's boards very, very efficiently. And that's something the Herald deck never really had in the past either. If you were dealing with an established board, you really had a problem dealing with it. And even with the addition of these cards like later, like last year, like you didn't really have a reliable way to get to them, so it wasn't really something you could really bank on. But now that they're actually just all searchable, it's just absolutely huge. But carrying on, 3 copies of Manju. This card is searchable off of Benton. It's just a solid level 4 normal summon. It just allows you to, just get more cards into circulation. It's a fairy, so usually you can just hold it in your hand for negations. It's recyclable off of Saphira, all these different things. It's recyclable off of Ritual Sanctuary. That's also something that's capable of being done with Stick and Chair as well. Just allow you to make basic rank 4 plays is pretty good without restricting you like Chair does. As well as the fact that this card is essentially Stratos. You can search this card off Benton, and then this card can search your Saphira. It just adds, a depth layer to the deck that the deck kind of needed. You could easily probably cut this card to 2, or even 1, just to be a search card off Benton, and then play other options like maybe Cyber Petite Angel or Gale Dogra. But as for right now, I'm really liking this card at 3, just because it's a level 4. And it just does what you need to do. But that's all the monsters. That's 18 monsters, and then there are 22 spells in the deck for the entirety of the deck profile. 3 copies of Ritual Sanctuary and 3 copies of Terraforming. This card is essentially Dragon Ravine, which is amazing. If you don't know what this card does, it's got 2 very important effects. Its first effect is once per turn, you can discard a spell card to search your deck for a ritual spell card or a light ritual type monster. So that immediately searches Herald, Saphira, or Benton, as well as Dawn of the Herald or Herald of Perfection. So it literally searches all of your combo starters, combo enablers, all that nonsense, and it searches all the important pieces. And then its second effect, which you can also use on the same turn, you can use each effect once per turn. Its second effect is you can target a light fairy type monster in your graveyard, and then shuffle spells from your graveyard into your deck that equal the level of the fairy you targeted, and then special summon it. So, for example, you have a Manju engraved, and 4 spells, or 4 plus spells rather, you can use this effect, shuffle those spells back into the deck, special summon the Manju. So you have to shuffle 4 spells back into your deck and special summon a level 4. This obviously works really well with cards like Star Seraph Scepter, because then that'll immediately trigger a search effect. And then you also get to use it with Manju to just make rank 4s and stuff like that. It's just ultimately really, really good and really powerful. It also resets things like your Preparation of Rites, your instant fusions, the spell cards are literally infinite in this deck, and that's actually very important for pre-preparation of rites. That's actually one of the most important things and one of the biggest aspects of this deck being really strong that you have, is that your ritual summons are essentially infinite. But anyway, carrying on, 4 copies of Preparation of Rites, 1 regular prep, and 3 copies of pre-preparation of rites. Now, pre-preparation of rites is really cool, specifically in this deck because it adds the ritual spell from deck and then adds the ritual monster from deck or grave to your hand. It's literally Preparation of Rites in reverse. So the main thing with this deck is that off of Ritual Sanctuary, in theory, you're always going to be able to shuffle back the ritual spells back into your deck as long as you keep a Dawn of the Herald and a Hymn of Light in circulation. They can banish themselves for their own effects, but as long as you keep at least one of them in circulation in your graveyard, pre-prep is always going to be live, and it's going to allow you infinite ritual summons over the course of your games because of the fact that it's always going to be able to add the ritual monster back from graveyard if it dies or if you exceeds with it or something like that. So essentially your resource pool, much like with the old Necros deck with double Emerald being popularized, is basically infinite, and that's something that's really cool. But carrying on, for the ritual spells, triple Dawn of the Herald and triple Hymn of Light. You play these cards because pre-preparation has to specifically search the card that summons the ritual monster. That's the reason why the card doesn't work in Gishki's, Necros, or Cyber Angels. It doesn't work with Advanced Ritual Art either. It specifically has to search the card that has the card name in its text of what it summons. So, for example, Hymn of Light specifically mentions Saphira. Dawn of the Herald specifically mentions Herald of Perfection. So you have to play these cards. But these cards actually aren't bad by any stretch of the imagination because you have such an increased accessibility into them off of just generic +1 cards like Preparation of Rites, as well as Ritual Sanctuary being able to search these cards. And they also have very relevant grave effects. Dawn of the Herald, when you use it, tributing Benton to summon your Herald of Perfection, your Benton will trigger to get you a search for a light fairy, and then Dawn of the Herald also has that neat little effect where you can banish it from grave to add one of the ritual materials that you used to summon your Herald of Perfection back to your hand. So basically, you'll summon your Herald of Perfection, and you'll also just plus off of it because Dawn of the Herald will add back the Benton, and then the Benton will also search you for another card, making it very, very, very good card interactions. Then Hymn of Light also has the grave effect that allows it to banish itself, much like Return of the Dragon Lords in the Blue Eyes deck, to protect light ritual monsters from dying to something. So it just adds you another layer of protection. Now, like I said, these cards do banish themselves from grave to fulfill that, but as long as you don't banish the last copies of them, your ritual summon pool, in theory, is infinite off of Ritual Sanctuary and pre-preparation of rites being shuffled back into the deck off of Ritual Sanctuary, recycling your level 4 monsters to the board. So there is that. This entire deck is based off the theory of infinite play if necessary, but it shouldn't be necessary because like rank 4s and rank 6s as well as like Herald of Perfection should deal with a lot of things, but ultimately it shouldn't need to get that far. But if it does need to get that far, every resource in the deck is resettable, and that's something that we really like. But anyway, carrying on, 2 copies of Instant Fusion just to extend the play. Basically, there wasn't really a better card we could think of to put in this slot. We tried Christias and all that sort of nonsense, but it just didn't seem to fit that well because it was really hard to summon at turn 1 outside of playing something like Gale Dogra, which would like fuel your graveyard with 2 Herald of Arclights from the extra deck to get your searches. But ultimately, this card seems fine at 2. Like I said, it's recyclable off Ritual Sanctuary like all the rest of the spells are. But ultimately, like the reason there's 2 in the deck is because you could potentially banish them off of Desires. But honestly, it's not really the biggest thing. But you can recycle them infinitely, and also recycle Norden off of, the amounts of rank 4 plays you're capable of making off of Ritual Sanctuary and stuff to make Emerald. So essentially, you do have the capability of resolving this quite a few times, but ultimately it's just there for just extra offensive power for the deck, because being able to, Norden back another 4 and then make something like Utopia the Lightning, or if you already had a like Scepter on the board, being able to go into one of your 3 material rank 4s like Ouroboros or Deltaros and get, the pluses there, is also just really, really good. But anyway, carrying on, 3 copies of Pot of Desires. 2 of these are proxies, yes, I'm aware. I have ordered them, they're in the mail, and I just didn't want to wait to make this video. They're going to be here in like 3 or 4 days. This card is actually just really good in this deck, simply because of the fact that you play literally almost every card in the deck is a 3 of, except for Preparation of Rites and Instant Fusion. Like, literally, there's tons of 3 ofs in this deck, and your chances of banishing all of your key 3 ofs, like, is incredibly astronomically low. There's almost no way for this card to actually like bone you other than like banishing all 3 of your Bentons or banishing all 3 of a certain ritual spell, but that is literally less than 1% in most cases. Like, just because you've got so many like cards to access it, and then you've got so many cards to access those cards anyway, that typically you can just use Pot of Desires after you specifically get to the card that you're looking for, and then thus it basically will never hurt you. Like, you can set up your play to summon Herald of Perfection and Saphira and get Stick Chair in hand, do all that, and then off of that just get a Pot of Desires, and that just digs you further into your deck to get more negations, giving you the generic +1 that it gives you off of just its ability. But like, we were looking for a lot of cards that would just give us extra cards. Gale Dogger was obviously an option, but that card makes you pay 6k, and it's a level 2, so it doesn't really mesh well with anything. So ultimately we decided on Pot of Desires, just because this deck, again, is very standardized with multiple 3 ofs, literally a playset of every like good card. And so Pot of Desires just doesn't really hurt you. And then the last card in the deck is an Upstart Goblin for consistency. But you can actually just recycle this card over and over again, which I think is hilarious. You can recycle this off of Ritual Sanctuary. So ultimately, more so than consistency-wise, this card is just really good because you're able to just put it as a free spell in grave and just use it off Ritual Sanctuary. It just fuels you further. But anyway, that's the entire main deck. That's 40 cards. And for the extra deck, literally almost never gone into, outside of just a few cards. Norden, every time you draw Instant Fusion, you make it, obviously. Utopia Beyond and Ptolemy M7 are just 2 generic or rank 6s, rather. You almost never make these. I mean, the only time I've made this like once, and that was dealing with like a big Cosmo board, but that was honestly it. Like, it was like something I could have probably dealt with without it anyway. The card I make the most is Evil Swarm Ouroboros. This card is very good. Your first turn Stick Chair plays that you resolve, you take a card out of your opponent's hand after drawing 3 cards, puts you really far ahead because you usually take a card out of your opponent's hand, thus making them go to 5 cards next turn when they draw, meaning that they've lost their on-the-draw advantage, and then you usually have between, like I said, 3 to 5 fairies in hand for negations for Herald of Perfection. 104 Masquerade, I've literally never made it. So Tellarknight, Deltaros, I make this card occasionally, but it's definitely not something that gets made a lot. Utopia the Lightning, and literally made it like once, and it was just because like Utopia Beyond was like the worst option to deal with a Cosmo board. I only had to deal with like one Cosmo Dart Destroyer, so just making Lightning just seemed like the best option. It was just the easier approach at the time. And then literally cards that I just almost never make. Dark Rebellion Siege Dragon, haven't made it once. Giant Hand, haven't made it once. Castel, maybe made it once. Can't even remember. I either made this or Ptolemy to spin something. I can't remember. Those cards basically do the same thing. Diamond Dyer, never made it. Fairy Cheer Girl, make this card almost every game that I open Instant Fusion. Just because of the fact that like you can make instant fusion, you can do an Ouroboros play with Stick Chair, and then you can instant fusion into this, thus trying to draw an extra card, and that would essentially turn instant fusion into deck digging deeper into your deck, as well as trying to get more fairy negations. So there is that. Pretty much any turn one that you open instant fusion, and you're just trying to dig for more cards. Specifically, if you're kind of low on the low side of negations, like you only have like 2 or 3. You typically just make this card because you try to dig for the other negation. Emerald, made it like once. It wasn't really relevant when I did make it, simply because all I did was put back like chairs with it to resolve like another stick chair combo. But like, I mean, I guess it was cool. And then Abyss Dweller, which has literally never been made because every grave effect basically gets locked out by Herald anyway, because you have so many ungodly numbers of negations in your hand off of when this deck chooses to work very well. But other than that, that's basically the deck list. That's the entirety of the deck list and deck profile. You could easily put like a Stellar, Constellar, Diamond in this extra deck. I just don't have one on hand, and it's honestly never come up. I usually just kill them with the Deltaros the turn that it gets summoned, and that sort of nonsense. But anyway, let me know what you guys think about this deck in the comments down below, whether you like it, whether you hate it, whether you like the concept of it, whether you hate the concept of it. Do you think it's unhealthy for the game that something like this is allowed to exist? Honestly, I think this deck is probably not Tier 1 status, even though it is very, very good and very consistent. I think it's probably the highest tier rogue deck, maybe like the very best Tier 2 deck, because it does, have some problems going second. You basically do want to go first and lock your opponent out of the game. Although going second, you are capable of, breaking boards with this deck, because you do have things like Utopia Beyond and the stick chair plays. Ultimately, it does become harder, though, because you are trying to just, break boards. I mean, if you do start your turn with Herald of Perfection, you do get to negate some Spell Speed 2 things, which basically ensures your play is going through. But Solemn Strike does exist in the format as well, and getting Herald of Perfection Solemn Struck is really, really problematic. Even though Hymn of the Light can dodge it once or twice, they do get to force something through under Herald with the Solemn Strikes. It will still negate the effect, so there is that. So ultimately, there are some issues going against this deck, but ultimately I think the deck is very, very strong and potentially the highest Tier 2 deck that's capable of competing in the format. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. As I've already said in the comments down below, this video got a little bit long. Sorry about that. Had some things to explain. The general-ish. I try to keep my deck profiles under 15 minutes long, but this one just kind of got away from me. But other than that, as always, comment, rate, subscribe to all the nonsense you usually do. Links are in the description of my Facebook links, background music playlists, and Twitch links. Like I said earlier in the video, if you want to buy some World Championship Qualifier sleeves for your extra deck in a pack of 15, then message me on my personal Facebook page, and we can hook something up for me to send you them. But other than that, again, let me know what you guys think about this deck profile and the deck itself in the comments down below. And other than that, thanks for watching, and as always, guys, take care.